Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we kick off a new year and a new series, the Dr. Phibes Retrospective with The Abominable Dr. Phibes starring Vincent Price. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comic Psycom from Tokyopop, and Clockworks from Humanoids. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Welcome back. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man from Monsterverse Comics. Say hello, Drew.
Hello, Drew, and you are peppy tonight. I
am. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be back for yet another year of the Castle of Horror. I've been listening to early episodes back when we had a different name. We were called Castle Dracula. We've grown. We've come into our own. We're more poetic. We're older and wiser. I'm excited. All right. And finally, also joining us from Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
I have missed you guys.
We missed you too.
You know what's funny is, Julia, we still call you color commentary, but I got to say that after something like 125 episodes of a horror movie podcast, you've got to be closing in on being some kind of expert.
I think the key is that I don't enjoy watching horror movies.
The key is not to like it.
Yes, exactly.
That's a paraphrase of the.
That's like taking willpower. I mean, truly, you must be having like some kind of Stockholm syndrome by now.
Yes.
I feel like it's one of those, facing your fears kind of things. So I really feel like I've become numb. I used to be terrified watching horror movies. Now I'm really not. So I think that's the big, achievement there.
Well, and you could probably put together a coherent theory about what kind of horror movies you like.
No, I do. I actually have liked a lot more than I would have thought I would have liked at this point.
So we've changed you.
Yes, you have. I've been altered.
Yes, like in Wicked. We can't say we've changed you for the better, but we've changed you for good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I did just quote a Broadway musical. Because
not your first time.
That is what 2015 is going to be like. Okay.
Show tunes, baby.
Okay. Awesome.
Castle of Horror on Broadway, 2015.
I would really like to see. I think Abominable Dr. Phibes would make a killer Broadway show.
Oh, I would pay good money to see that.
Wouldn't it? I mean,
no
Bill
pun
Nye
intended.
Could play Dr. Phibes like crazy,
A killer Broadway show. No pun intended. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Slay him.
The Abominable Dr. Phibes is a 1971 British horror film, says Wikipedia, starring Vincent Price and American actor Joseph Cotton, who we may know from Baron Blood. Its Art Deco sets, dark humor, and performance by Price have made the film and its sequel, Dr. Phibes Rises Again, which we will do next week, cult classics. The movie also features British actor and comedian Terry Thomas and Welsh actor Hugh Griffith, with a cameo appearance by future Bond girl Caroline Munro. The screenplay was written by James Whitten and William Goldstein and directed by Robert Fust. In the storyline, the title character Phibes blames the medical team that attended to his wife for her death 4 years prior and sets out to exact vengeance on each one. In 1925, the year is. Phibes is inspired in his murderous spree by the 10 plagues of Egypt from the Old Testament. So, let's get into our opening thoughts. Let's go Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go. Tony, and I'm curious if this is the first time you've seen this movie or if it's a classic you're returning to. Opening thoughts, Abominable Dr. Phibes.
This is the first time. I've seen it several times, and I really dig it. I like how crazy mod it is. The costumes, it's like super vibrant. Like, it's got some great kills. I mean, if anybody who makes movies like Saw or any of those says that they've never seen this, they are a liar. They flat out, this is like, there's been other movies since then and probably before then, but this really sets the bar as far as that goes. I like Dr. Phibes as a supervillain. He's one of the best supervillains. I mean, I kind of want to see a Dr. Phibes versus Dr. Doom. That would be awesome. But yeah, I really, really dig this movie. I can't wait to get into it because there's so much good awesomeness here.
Very, very cool. Julia, The Abominable Dr. Phibes, I'm assuming this is your first time watching this film.
It is, in fact, my first time watching this film. I agree with Tony that it is really interesting to see a movie with so much Art Deco and really interesting stuff like the crazy toy band, like the whatever they call those guys.
Yeah, he has a band of robots.
The Clockwork
robots.
And he labels it the Dr. Phibes band or whatever. Despite the fact that he's the only person who's really going to see it. They're advertising.
Yeah, well, and the costumes, like you said, like you said, Tony, the costumes are so crazy. Like they'll suddenly come out as if I really thought that when we first saw it that it was a performance, that there was an audience, but there's no audience. It's just a performance for us. But it's very, very cool. I'm less enamored of the way that all the murders happen. I think they're kind of, I don't know, but whatever. It's interesting at least. But yeah, I think it was a fun picture to watch.
Very cool. Drew, Dr. Phibes.
This is not the first time I've seen this movie. I've seen this movie many, many times, and in fact, I am wearing a Dr. Phibes T-shirt as we record this. So you can easily guess by that I am a big fan of this movie. This is probably my favorite Vincent Price movie, and I will echo everybody else's statements. The costumes, the sets, the music, the Phibes character himself, and yes, the murders are all delicious in this movie, and it was just fun to revisit it, and I've just been thinking about it for days. So
that's really great.
I can't wait to get
the T-shirt you have, is it the Jack Kirby illustration that you posted, or is it something?
No, it's a shot of Vincent Price at the organ.
Very cool.
This would make an excellent double feature with Phantom of the Paradise, though.
Oh, it would.
It would.
No,
it totally would.
Absolutely. It's certainly contemporaneous with Phantom of the Paradise. I think that movie's like 1974, right, or somewhere around there. And this is 71, and I loved watching this film. I mean, it's really the design is a great surprise. There's very few horror movies I can think of that take place in the 1920s. I can think of very few major films that take place in the 1920s. There's Gatsby, and then what? I mean, generally, this is an era that, despite the fact that it looks quite beautiful, you just don't see.
Well, we're having a lot of fun on Downton Abbey in the 20s.
Yeah, that's right. Downton Abbey is now covering the same period that Dr. Phibes takes place in, which means that that in theory, Dr. Phibes could visit, Downton. And
how I wish that would happen.
But
I will have to say also, whenever you talk about it, Jason, that the first time I saw this movie and Volnavia comes on the screen, I was like, this is a movie for Jason. The
anatomically named Volnavia.
Yeah, I was like, this is a Jason movie. If Jason hasn't seen this, we have to see this.
I'm curious why, because this is a weird.
Yeah, well, just how mod and how the costuming and the colors and everything, it instantly was a Jason.
If I could decorate my whole house,
if
I could decorate my whole house in that Art Deco, I would. I actually have an Art Deco wardrobe, and I have kind of our furniture in our room is Art Deco-y. I love that time period. I think it's so cool. I is so coveting the floor that they had in one of the which that it is.
It's Phibes' Lair. Phibes' Lair has an amazing floor. Although his mortal enemy, Dr. Vesalius, has an equally Art Deco set of rooms. We
actually have the chairs that he has in the waiting room.
That's right, because those, interestingly enough, those chairs, the metal chairs that Dr. Vesalius has, which are all in white, and those chairs also turn up again in a different color. I think they're red or something.
We have them in black.
In the hotel, we have them in black, but they are Art Deco chairs, but they were being reproduced in the 70s, which is weirdly enough why they're in our house, because I think we inherited them or something. But,
do you know that Vesalius is actually a Flemish scientist who cut up corpses to learn about the workings of the body? That's the name. That's where they get the name from.
That guy probably would have had a lot easier time dealing with Dr. Phibes than the doctor in this movie.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Peter Cushing, but he declined because his wife was sick at the time.
That's really fine. Okay, I was thinking about Erte. It used to be, I think, in the 90s. There was a lot of Art Deco art that was suddenly going through this resurgence. Anyway, yes, absolutely looks beautiful. I'll set it there, and we should go straight into the setting. Now, we were talking about, I want to talk about first the setting and the sets, and then we'll go into the tone of this film a little bit. So the sets that we've talked about, there's really not that many, but there's the it's 1920s, and so you've got an Art Deco lair from Dr. Phibes, where he plots his, and I should mention, just to sort of make reference to what the plot of this movie is, this movie, for some reason, follows the bad guy. It follows the supervillain. We are watching.
Well, they even call him the protagonist in the credits.
Yeah, it opens up with this very sort of kind of old Hollywood, antiquated kind of presentation. Our protagonist, the various, and it gives these very sort of old-fashioned names for the different characters. And yeah, Phibes is out to get revenge for against a team of doctors. We come to find this out later, but there's no harm in spoiling this right now. And basically, there are a bunch of doctors that he needs to kill, and he just sets out to kill them. But as you guys were talking about, let's describe this lair that he's in. It is ostensibly underground. It has multiple levels. It has these great big staircases, and it essentially is built with us at the camera being sort of an audience for a performance that Dr. Phibes
wearing something that looks like a trash bag.
He sort of performs it himself over and over again. We open up, with him in this big
it's like it's a jazz dance hall, but there's only two people in it, except for these and those clockwork, jazz musicians that he has.
Yeah, it's a full band, like you'd have on the Titanic or something. They're all wearing black tuxedos, except that they are clockwork people, and they are playing music. And what Tony said, they're named something like Dr. Phibes.
The Dr. Phibes Clockwork Wizards.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Phibes Clockwork Wizards.
He's playing the organ the pops that comes up from underground, under the, it's like on an elevator, so it comes up, and he's playing, and it's crazy. That is, the way he plays it, doesn't look like he's actually playing it, which is kind of annoying, because he's his arms go way up in the air when there's actually music being played. But and
he can automate. If he can build robots, he can make it hold. It can sustain a note.
Player organ, you're saying?
Yeah. Well, or as needed.
Well, I think that's all part of the style of the movie. He's overdoing it because that's how Phibes is.
Right.
Yeah. So what the hell is going on? Because it's very strange that Phibes is performing this. He's playing the organ. He's got his band playing. His little assistant. And right now I want to talk about her, but I'll say what is going on with her. So in this place, his little assistant is dancing or variously trying on other costumes and sort of parading around as if to entertain somebody. But there's no one there but just them and this clockwork band. And what is she? Can somebody explain to me who Volnavia?
It's his more contemporary Harley Quinn, Yeah. His major domo. And here's the thing, I still one of my notes is how do you go about finding a Volnavia? How do you because they have a very the way everything plays out. It's a very platonic relationship. You know?
Well,
he still loves his wife. Like, go ahead, Drew.
I've heard fan theories that she's like a demon that he somehow summoned up, or that she is another. That there was like a cut sequence that when she perishes at the end, that there was revealed that she's another robot. You know, none of this stuff really
means adequately. I have no idea. Like, I just think it's weird
really
that
matter.
Yeah, I think he just got a really weird chick to like, you know.
I
don't
thought
know.
for the longest time I thought that was.
I also in my notes thought that like Dr. Phibes being recluse and having all of these eccentricities, that maybe Dr. Phibes and Prince would like to hang out, because Prince has all these women in his band, and they're kind of like do their thing. Like, I want to see the Dr. Phibes Prince crossover as well, because they
you're right. I mean, he's performing for himself. Whenever he commits a murder, he in this great ritualized way melts the face off of a wax dummy representing.
Oh, I think the ritualistic thing. I mean, you know, this was kind of pre. You know, into the 80s, you know, everybody wanted to start to attach sort of pop psychology to horror movie villains, and this predates that. But, you know, the ritualistic aspect, you could just say, well, he's psychotic and he feels like a compulsion to do all this stuff because he's psychotic.
Oh, I agree with you.
He's obviously cracked. Like, I mean, you don't come up with that stuff.
Did you talk about his wife?
Yeah. The first, we've talked about Volnavia without actually describing her, first of all. Just so we know, Volnavia is a fairly diminutive, extremely silent, apparently woman. You know, she might be a robot, but I like Tony's theory that she's just an insane person that hangs out with Dr. Phibes and does all of his sort of dirty work. I mean, she drives, she guards the getaway car while he's doing some shtick or another. She plays the violin while he's murdering people just for ambiance. Like, hey, well, I'm going to need something. Volnavia, bring your violin. I'm glad that you play that. Yeah, like, while I'm doing that. She's happy to oblige for all of this. That's what is just amazing. Like, I think she's the best sidekick for this crazy supervillain. It's perfect. And she's always dressed to the nines. Like, some kind of crazy costume.
The jeweler actually just, when he's describing her, he's like, no, a lady. And then she's like, fashionable.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Right. She went around and she went to the jeweler and because Dr. Phibes also, not only does he have to have wax dummies that he can melt of each of the people, he has to have a different amulet representing each of the people. I mean, Phibes has worked out a whole ritual, like we talked about, probably dealing with some deep-seated psychosis. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's amazing. And yes, he has all these steps that he has to go through. Can somebody explain to me? First of all, this is the 20s. It's very clearly supposed to be 1925. But Drew, actually, you were writing or saying somewhere that you don't buy this as the 20s. You think this is?
I think it's well, I mean, it is the 20s because they say it's the 20s, but to me, it's sort of an ambiguous. It's the same thing a lot of the Universals are. It's a more, it's got a veneer of being the 20s, but there's certainly a lot of aspects of the 70s in there, and even in some of the way the cops are dressed, they look like they're wearing leftovers from a Victorian hammer.
That's absolutely right.
And it's to me, it's got this sort of vague anytime. It's a time period that they tell you it's 1925. So for all intents and purposes, it's 1925. But it's really, it's this time period that never existed. It's a version of 1925 that exists purely for the sake of this movie. It's not a real time and place. It's a fantasy world.
Or for the sake of having Art Deco sets. I mean, I agree with you that when you look at the cops are all dressed in such a way that they could be Edwardian, it could be...
Well, they have bowler hats.
Speaking of the cops, these are the opposite of the cops in Invisible Man. We talked about that. These guys, and they kind of a lot of this movie pokes fun at the very rich and the police establishment. Like, they go to great pains to show that these cops can barely piece anything together. And a lot of the rich ones.
Well, even when they do, they're undermined by the superior officer.
Right, exactly. And so, there's people rich people don't listen. They just play with their trains and do random things, or they're, have weird pervert stag films and all this stuff.
Oh my God! Yes.
It's such a weird stab at the establishment in general. In amongst all this crazy, awesome, vibrant cinematography, there's a lot. You could write several papers, I think, on Dr. Phibes.
Well, especially because all of the every one of the victims in this picture is a doctor or a professor or a scientist,
or a nurse.
Yeah, somebody who's part of the medical profession. Somebody, nurses really. It's funny because doctors generally they have their own servants, but a nurse is generally a person who is not at the top of the heap. So it seems it's a little more unfair that he's also going to kill the nurses that attended these surgeons. But in fact, we should go through this series because there are a number of these murders, and I'd like to sort of tick them off, and we can comment on it as we go. All right, so you mentioned the first one, Tony. You were talking about this is Dr. Longstreet. He is one of the doctors who worked on Phibes' wife, and he's got the night to himself because he got rid of his maid, and he's going to watch his 1920s silent porn, which involves basically a woman in
dancing with a snake.
Yeah, she's in a one-piece bathing suit.
She's in a belly.
Well, she's in her belly dancer outfit, straight up.
That's true. But she had bloomers, didn't she?
But it's tribal. They're tribal pants.
It's a belly dancer outfit. But the difference is, it's one of those where, oh, look, no, she's really exotic, even though she's not. It's a very, of the era film. And then she puts a snake in her mouth. And the way she puts the snake in her mouth has him really, really, really hot and bothered. Weird pervert, old rich guy.
He's very much enjoying watching this silent film, and he has to crank himself. He has a it's a hand cranked projector. It's great. It's a great detail. He's sipping he's got the night to himself. So he's
hand cranked projector and other things that are.
Yes. Boy, you're going blue tonight. This is amazing. And I can't remember how he is subdued, but basically, he's watching.
Well, Navia shows up and he's all, "I'm Dr. Longfellow," and gets strapped to a chair, and then Phibes comes in, and he looks a lot less.
Okay. Yeah, and this is the thing that bothers me the most. So this is the one where he ties the guy to the chair and he's going to drain the blood out of the guy. Fine, except that the problem is all of these kills are good, and we're going to go through them, some faster, some slower, depending on if they're interesting. But the fact is, nobody really fights. Everybody is kind of it's all I would need is just a little bit of extra, Volnavia sprays him in the face with some kind of a drug that makes him loopy, and so that he can be tied down or whatever. But that's never really clear to me. That over and over again, these people just sort of allow themselves to be killed.
Well, not that they really deal with it much, but there is the implication that Phibes is very strong, and the point where he subdues the chauffeur. So even if these guys did fight back, I don't think that it would help them much. But in the case of this guy, I think he was drunk.
Yeah.
So that's why he didn't struggle very much.
That's true. So they tie him to a chair, and then he is exsanguinated while Volnavia, wearing her really awesome, Russian fur hat, plays violin outside. And
that scene was so boring to me. Oh, my gosh. It went on forever and ever and ever while they're just dripping the blood. And why didn't the guy leave anyway? He could have taken off. I guess because he was so drunk. But
oh, well, that's what Drew was saying.
Well, what would have done? Like I said, he would have run away, but Phibes would have caught up with him. All that would have done.
Really. It's he's like a zombie. He doesn't move very fast, I don't think. I don't know, but that was just really weird.
Where's the implication that he at any point that he moves slow. He gets around pretty good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just saying that the fact that he didn't, yes, because he was probably drunk and maybe they drugged him, I don't know. But it just seemed very strange that he never even struggled. And then it just
granted,
slow.
but
that's my least favorite.
I actually think this is the most horrific. I actually think this is the most, as far as just an idea, this is probably the most horrific death. Because he's still alive while they're doing this, and he's conscious. So, like, to me, that is
strange, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a terrible idea to think about, like, this is being done to you. Like,
well, also, he's been alive, I think, a lot longer than someone who would be exsanguinated, like, would be alive.
I tend to agree. I think once you've lost, like, 7 pints of blood, I just don't find it likely the guy would be alive.
You're just sleepy.
You know, but whatever. It's an interesting idea.
He certainly wouldn't be conscious. He might be alive.
The frogs. All right. So, next, you know.
Well, no, wait. I have to say one of my favorite parts of the movie, and I love how Dr. Phibes, you know, he doesn't speak often, and when he does, it's through this contraption he puts in the side of his neck, which does remind me, not since I mentioned, you know, Phantom of the Paradise, he has something similar at one point where he's. But I love after he's put all of the blood on the mantle, he comes back and he looks at this painting, and then looks over at the doctor like, really? You have just such crap taste in art, and it's just this look. Like, it doesn't last very long, but it's amazing. Like, Vincent Price just sells it. Like, his contempt is so great. It's just like,
well, Price himself was a bit of an art collector, so that might have been legitimate.
It's awesome, but his look is just great. Oh, man, it was so, he just, like, looks back and just like, oh, you people.
And also,
we skipped over the bats, though. Speaking of blood.
Oh yeah.
The fruit bats that would never hurt a fly.
They always. Really cute.
There was a point in time where anytime they needed bats because they're big, they would always use them. You know, they used them in Temple of Doom as well, and it's you know, I think it's just because they're big and they are impressive looking.
Yeah.
They're those enormous fruit bats, which I think are they're either cute or just hideous. But I mean, and it is frightening. The guy goes to bed and wakes up, and there's this bat the size of a small cat.
And then suddenly there's tons of them. Now, I think that bats or bees are way more horrific than just slowly having your blood drained from you. I mean, that's just such a boring way to die. Whereas these guys, oh my God, getting attacked by bats, ugh.
But I want to talk about the frog mask. All right.
The frog mask is really
frog mask is pretty good.
It's creative. It's really creative. I've never seen something like that.
Yeah, so for this one, Dr. Phibes has to go to a costume party and sneak in and be the guy to be able to, when his target walks in, he has to be there to intercept and go, hey, you know, here's your mask, since he didn't bring a mask. I mean, think how much planning this had to involve, you know? Think of the meeting he had to have with Volnavia. It's like, well, listen, you know, Dr. Hargreaves has already set up to have a mask, only I want you, Volnavia, to go across town and make sure they run out of bear masks. So that he'll have to go to the party without a mask. And we need somebody to, like, get rid of the butler. You, Volnavia, I'd like you to get rid of the butler as well so that I can get into the party. You know. Oh, and Volnavia, perhaps, you know, because he doesn't have anybody else unless he's sending these Clockwork band members out to do stuff. And so anyway, he gives a big frog mask. I mean, like, literally, like, Froggy went in a giant thing the size of, like, a, you know.
It's a helmet. It's like a helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the doctor puts on his head, and
he says he's a head shrinker.
Yes, he does. He goes, I'm a head shrinker. And he puts the thing on, and Phibes, like, locks it in the back and then wanders away. And what's groovy is this guy's walking around the party with this mask on, and the mask just continues to tighten itself. And that's amazing. I mean, this is...
it's so, like, the way it's shot, where he starts kind of seeing in fisheye, and everybody's like, hey, everything's good. And the music kind of changes, and it gets more intense, and then he slowly is like, you know, everybody's like, oh, you're looking crazy, it's at this party, until it crushes his head with this clockwork, whatever mechanism that's inside it. screen starts to go red. Oh, it's so well shot and just gruesome, but just really well done and horrific.
It is horrific.
Great.
Well, and everybody's just looking at him, which is kind of, again, like as far as the things that are kind of annoying, it's like, really? Nobody's going to help the guy, at all?
Well, I don't think they probably just think they're at a party. They probably just think he's plastered.
Yeah.
No, but when he starts going, he's trying to take it off, and he's like, I can't get it off, or whatever, you think somebody
again,
would.
I'm with Drew that if you're watching the guy, you don't know what in the hell is going on until he falls down and blood starts pouring out of his mask.
Yeah.
But, so that's amazing. That's an amazing kill.
It was.
And I have
It was
to say,
really good. And that was a pretty mask, too. I liked it.
So
there's all the costumes are great. In
you got to remember, they're rich. They're all rich, so they're terrible people, according to this movie.
But
and utterly incompetent.
Is rich too.
And
we forget that Phibes murders the rich, but he himself is also rich.
Yeah, like I said, you could write quite the paper on this movie, but they're all like too busy being rich and not caring to help their fellow man.
Can we back up for a second to the fact that this guy's dead? Isn't he dead?
Phibes?
No.
Yeah. He's supposedly dead. He's got like a tomb, right?
He made that tomb himself.
He was in a car accident.
Yeah.
And he
got away.
When he was rushing to save his wife, there was no body. They buried ashes, which were.
But what I'm saying is, shouldn't his estate have been, like, something distributed in some way?
Well, they talk
about that. It was distributed to different holders across Europe. They talk about that.
Yeah.
So he was
his money was cared for.
Yeah, so it was probably putting it in places that he could access, because he was like, well, if I'm going to go on a murdering spree, 9 must die.
I gotta say, let's see, out of the, some of the deaths are merely so-so, but the Locust, to me, the Locust is probably the most memorable one of all. This is the one where they've got, basically, they think there's only one victim left to protect, and that's, Joseph Cotton, Dr. Vesalius, says, let's go to the hospital/hotel where I work out of, and we'll get the nurse that helped me, deal with Phibes' wife, and we'll put her under protection. We'll guard her room. He says, hey, woman, take a sleeping pill and go to sleep because nothing bad's going to happen because we're okay here. And then Dr. Phibes is already in the place. It was as simple as that. He was just already there. He's in the elevator, and this is amazing. Phibes goes into, I guess, the room above her room, and he has created a diagram for where her bed should be, including a long diagram of an actual woman, so he lays that out. And
which is anatomically correct. It's not just an outline. It has, like, nipples. And, like, the art design, it's so good.
He's such an overachiever that I can only imagine that it's actually her exact height.
Absolutely, dude.
So, again with the things that are annoying to me, he drills a hole in the floor that goes all the way through a big, like not a tiny little hole, but like maybe a 2-inch in diameter hole.
Yeah.
And then like all this wood and all this plaster falls on her head, but she doesn't wake up. Then he starts sleeping pill. What? How did he get her a sleeping pill?
Dr. Vesalius told him.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Okay, that makes sense. Yes.
That's it.
But
does that make Dr. Vesalius partly responsible for her death?
Yes.
Yeah.
He is.
But even with the sleeping pill, once he starts dribbling whatever the hell that green shit is on her.
Oh yeah, what did he grind up to make the
Brussels sprouts? It looks.
Yeah, it's something that would entice. He makes a concoction that entices the locusts.
Yes.
To eat
whatever. It should by itself kill her because it smothers her. I mean, he completely covers her, all of her.
He makes a honey goop that he then whatever he
dribbles
makes
all over her.
And he pours it down
into a pipe,
into her room and covers her face with it. By the way, in my office, this scene where he's making the goop is playing, and Volnavia is bringing him more of the little. They look like limes or something. What's interesting is at this point,
the Brussels. They're Brussels sprouts, or
okay.
supposed to be something. Yeah,
No.
yeah, they look exactly like it.
So.
Yeah, I think they are Brussels
What else
sprouts.
could it be?
I just want to point out.
They may not supposed to be Brussels sprouts, but that's what that is. Like that's what that vegetable is. I love how he picks them out too. He's like looking at it like, no, this isn't good enough for our.
No, I know. Hundreds and hundreds of them pour out down this chute into the pot. Those are fine, but the basket he needs to be picky about. Where I'm like, where are these ones coming from that come down that chute? Who's putting them up? Like, did somebody pour them up there? Like, who did that?
Volnavia, probably.
Or
a robot. He does have a robot.
Yeah,
that's true.
No, that's right.
A robot.
They're probably running the thing. But I just wanted to point out, Volnavia brings in the basket of these Brussels sprouts, and she's wearing yet another strange thing, a golden dress with, like, wings for some reason. I mean, literally, either that or it's just an enormous sort of Dracula collar. And she wears the weirdest crap all the time.
I know.
I think
that's part of why. I think that's part of why she's okay. Like, she's like, well, he keeps me in crazy clothes. He keeps me in fashion, in Volnavia-style fashion. So, as long as he keeps up paying, whatever, I'll go play violin while he exsanguinates somebody, or, while we cook our, we'll hang out while we cook our Brussels sprout locust food. That's cool, too,
There was one where she was wearing basically a Manos the Hands of Fate outfit with all of these giant fingers. And she was just standing there with her arms held wide. Again, no reason, just looks awesome.
Just for the performance. Well, and I love her spiky like crazy crown, whatever headdress.
Yeah, that headdress is amazing.
Yeah, she must have a hell of a closet, this one. But anyway, so they take the Brussels sprouts and they make a big sort of goopy honey with it.
And so if they pour it on her face, that should have woken her up or killed her, one or the other.
Well, maybe it does kill her. We don't know. We pour it all over the face of this nurse. And then what he does is he just sort of patiently taps a jar full of
That's
giant
really pretty funny. That's really funny because they're all just kind of like, no, we're not really ready. So he's like, come on. You can do it. You can do it. Go.
Yes,
really
giant
funny.
grasshoppers, or locusts, in other words, and I mean, I'm from Texas, so to me a locust is a cicada, but these are like
these are biblical locusts.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and,
like straight
and so
up. I mean, they come from at the point where they put it together, where each one of the amulets is a Hebrew letter for one of the plagues, and so he's like each person gets their own plague.
Right.
Visited upon them, which that's pretty amazing too.
So it's they go there in the morning, knock knock, nurse isn't answering. They go in, the nurse's face has been eaten off. It is but a skull. And that is amazing. I have to say, that's a very, very imaginative kill. It takes a lot to get to it because you got to do the drilling the hole and the stupid goop and.
Well, Phibes understands that perfection takes time.
Exactly.
He's not one of these, horror movie killers that he's not out for just a quick, stab and continue. He's a showman, Phibes.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you're right.
This is the same guy he's got a lot of stuff going on. Like the one guy that they hook up a hail machine in his car. And hailed him to death in his car. Like when Phibes drives up, Phibes' car has a profile of Phibes as like pull down like curtains in his car. That's amazing.
Yeah.
This is the same guy
who windows. He has drawings of himself on his car. He is like Batman in a way. He's like an evil Batman.
He's the best supervillain. He's just amazing. And also, like, remember, whenever he has a voice box because he can't talk, so he has a gramophone type device, and he hooks his voice up to it. Also, he can hook up loudspeakers.
His mouth. So they actually did paralyze his face to do some of those scenes, and then they wear a mask in some of the other scenes so that it would look like he was
good Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's talking to his wife, and she's dead. But he could just think these things, but instead, no, he hooks up a device and talks to her as if she's alive. Like, you're thinking, like, oh, he could say all these things, and he has a whole monologue to her.
Yes.
But he talks, like, with this device, like, very robotic. Like, it's Vincent Price, but he's, speaks in a very monotone way. And, I mean, this
supposedly
really
one of Price's... This is supposedly one of Price's favorite roles, and it's really easy to see why.
It's great.
I think it's his 100th role.
I can't imagine it. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's an amazing character. I'm not completely sold on the notion that this is nowhere near my favorite Vincent Price. I mean,
man, I love this stuff. I don't know.
He is amazing, but no. I mean, compared with like House of Usher or Mask of the Red Death,
he gets a lot of good speeches in this, and the thing that Vincent Price supposedly said about Phibes is he played a lot of crazy men, but Phibes was his quote unquote classic monster. He got to wear a lot of prosthetic makeup, and there was certainly an element of the Phantom of the Opera here, and I don't know. I mean, who knows if it's true or not? You never know with these things. But
no, that's true. I mean, that's obviously that is the case. This is very. I can see having great fondness for it if you're him, because this is a really unusual entry, and he had room to experiment. He made a hell of a lot of movies. So, as Joy said,
well, he does a lot with it. Like, even we're talking about the gramophone thing, but like when he's delivering those speeches, like he moves his face and throat in a way to where he sells the idea that he somehow made this device that he can work his jaw and what's left of his vocal cords in such a way that he's making this voice. And we already talked about like the scene with the art and everything. There's a lot of acting in it with his eyes, and some of it is just like stuff where he makes like a psychotic stare. But I mean, a lot of it is really good, really good facial acting, and especially when the scenes when he has the full sort of mummified face on, like the way he uses his eyes in those scenes is very nice.
There's a scene where when they kill the guy in the plane. So one of the doctors is this rich jackwad who goes out and flies his little biplane, and they kill him by putting rats
on a plane. Yeah.
Nice. Phibes actually nearly smiles with this. He has sort of a mirthful look in his eyes, and even claps. He's sort of like.
I couldn't watch that scene. I hate rats.
I'm not crazy about rats myself.
You and Indiana Jones's dad.
It had to be.
Right.
I mean,
had to be rats.
We have a 9-year-old who has a hamster. Is a hamster? I'm unnerved by this thing, man. I can't touch it. I won't. She's always like bringing it. Here, hold
really,
hamster.
really,
like,
Jason.
It's cute, though.
This is awesome. Like, of all
I like to think what you would do if you saw my rabbit. He weighs 45 pounds.
Well, I mean, no, I have a healthy fear of rabbits. I mean, I saw,
Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Night of the Lepus.
I saw Food of the Gods. I'm down with that. The Night of the Lupus, that's.
I actually
Harvey.
just went and saw. I went to the Alamo. Harvey, yeah. I went to the Alamo this weekend for their Monty Python and the Holy Grail quote along, which was awesome. It was so cool.
Yeah, and it does. It has an inset. But hamsters are rodents, man. I mean, they're rats, and I do not truck with rodents. So.
Of all the things.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, rabbits aren't in fact rodents. So. Not that saves you from the terrifying hamsters.
It's very tiny. I'm sure it's quite lovable. It's just not my thing. It had to be hamsters. All
right, Dr. Jones.
Oh, man.
All right.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, we were going over the kills. So I should point out, these kills are in theory based on the 10 plagues, which is this biblical concept. They're mixed up a little bit. It's not quite the case, but and
right.
the final one, of course, are two of them: darkness and the firstborn. And this is what brings us to the end of the film, because the firstborn turns out to be the weirdly dubbed teenage son of Dr. Berzelius, Joseph Cotton, again, of the third man and Baron Blood. His son has been captured and put under general anesthesia and laid on a table and chained to the table, and over the table is a tube that's going to pour acid on his face in precisely 6 minutes, and he's got the only way to unlock his bonds is with a key that Dr. Phibes has surgically inserted into the boy's chest cavity. It's like near his heart. And so Joseph Cotton has 6 minutes to perform surgery and cut his son open without killing him and retrieve the key and unlock the bonds. That's brilliant. I mean, that's great. This is actually like James Bond level suspense. I was really impressed with that. And Tony, you're right. This is it's hard to imagine that the guys who did Saw had never at least seen this sequence of Dr. Phibes.
Yes, they say they have it, they're fired. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Or, you don't make that. I guess you could have seen the movies that were influenced by this and extrapolate from that, but that would be a stretch.
What was it you were going to say?
I mean, this is sort of a horror movies fan horror movie. I think if you were into horror, this is a movie that you hear passed around a lot. It's funny, when I mentioned that I was watching this on Facebook, immediately a bunch of my friends from high school, who some of which I haven't really talked to that much in years, immediately were like, "Oh yeah, I remember watching that with you." And this is like, if you're into horror flicks, this seems to be one that you got to see Dr. Phibes.
No, absolutely. It is, and again, I can't say enough about the fact that it looks nothing at all like other horror movies of the period or now. I mean, you're right, by the way, Tony or Drew, whoever said it first, that it's most, to me, like Phantom of the Paradise, in as much as it's a horror film that is just weird compared with pretty much everything else that's out there. I mean, look how brightly lit everything is. There's all the plants around and all the beautiful sort of cream and white and yellow spaces and gold. And it's very Gatsby-esque. This doesn't look like anything. We just did a bunch of other horror films that were within a decade or so of this that as you were fond of saying, they're very grungy. This is the opposite of that. It's very elegant. Yeah, this is 1971. So Chainsaw comes out just 3 years after this. Chainsaw is in a different universe from this film. It's a And what also?
Yeah, when I think of 1971, I don't think of elegant. That is not the word I think of.
No, you're right. I mean, this is a period piece, kind of like a Hammer film, which was still around. But here's the other weird thing, and this I wish we had somebody. I couldn't find anything on the internet about this. If anybody were an expert or could call us and tell us what the hell's the deal, I am totally confused by the fact that this is an American international picture produced by Samuel Z. Arkoff, who is the king of schlock, okay? Now, he did make a lot of really beautiful Edgar Allan Poe pictures, true, or he put them out anyway, and Corman made them. But this is a beautiful-looking movie. This, when you consider Arkoff is the name behind, Beach Blanket Bingo and Beach Party and, the Invisible Bikini and Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine and all those things, other than the fact that those last two movies had Vincent Price in them, this movie is an A+ for art direction and classiness. And those movies aren't even trying. There's no attempt whatsoever to make those movies look memorable. And so, what the hell is going on? Where did this extra money come from? how exactly is this? I don't understand why this is as good as it is. Maybe that's not fair of me to say, but it just doesn't fit with what I've seen from the rest of the AIP output. I mean,
well, if it makes you feel any better, Arkoff and company apparently were just as surprised as everybody else when this was a reasonable hit.
They're probably like, oh, this is way too good looking. Nobody's going to like this.
I think it's definitely a quirky film, for lack of a better word. I mean, it doesn't. It's an unusual, which is probably why it's endured. It's probably why it's one of those things that has continued to generate fans. Because when I came across this movie for the first time, I was in high school. So it's not and by then it's still a 20-year-old movie.
Yeah, it's really unusual, and I guess it's important to note that it's unusual for its time. It's unusual for its time period that it's presenting, and it's still unusual. So I mean, I think Joya, you can close your ears. It's like Steely Dan in that sense. It didn't fit with whatever the hell was going on when it came out, and it's still sort of set apart in that way. Yes, Dr. Phibes is like Steely Dan. We should actually wrap it up.
I bet that's a pretty rare combo. Like,
I don't know how I feel about that, because I don't like Steely Dan, but I do like Dr. Phibes.
Yay! I like you even more now, Drew, than I did before.
You don't have to like Steely Dan.
Well, I don't. I know I don't have
Steely Dan. You don't have to like Steely Dan. You just really have to love Steely Dan, like, a lot.
You don't have to like Steely Dan unless you want to be Jason's friend.
Yeah, it's okay.
Many of
my
friends do not appreciate
if you really just don't care about Jason at all, you can not like Steely Dan.
I care about Jason, but Steely Dan is where I draw the line.
Not enough to make that.
Steely Dan is where I draw the line. I've known you for years. I love doing this podcast.
Talk to the hand, Drew, if you're not a Dan man.
I can live with that.
Oh, Tony.
I will sleep like a baby wrapped in the warmth of my Steely Dan hate.
True companion. By the way, soundtrack. Come on.
By the way, Drew, if you don't like them, you're not Jason's true companion. That's all I got to say.
Well, I would hope not, because
I am supposed to be his true companion, and I can't stand it in the end. So there you go.
Oh man,
we're gonna start a new podcast. You're gonna talk
podcast therapy.
We'll do a different Dan single every week.
Oh my God! Kill me now.
Jason Henderson's Danland, the podcast.
All right. Anyway,
speaking of Dr. Phibes.
Dreaming of true companions, join Jason in Danland.
We should get our final thoughts on Dr. Phibes and then go to our endorsements. And I apologize.
Oh, by the way, before we do that, though, we have to talk about the awesome ending where darkness happens, where
we haven't even gone over how the fact that Volnavia is melted by the acid.
Yes, right. I'm sorry.
Finish the movie.
You got all lost on your Steely Dan kick, and you're skipping over important stuff, Jason.
Yes. So there was
Dr. Phibes would not like Steely Dan, by the way. He has good taste in music.
Well, he's obsessed with Art Deco. I mean, which is group. Dr. Phibes would really like Janelle Monáe, I think. I'd care to test that theory. But all right, there were two deaths left.
He's more of a taco fan.
One was the firstborn. That didn't happen. And the final one appears to be Darkness, which is where Phibes encases himself in the dark. But before that happened...
Well, the firstborn one, he's got the firstborn of one of the doctors.
Right. We talked about it with the trap, the 6 minutes, and that gets done. Right. And so Volnavia runs in and unfortunately gets caught underneath the falling acid and dies off screen. We hear her scream, and And that sucks, man, because Volnavia was pretty awesome, and I could not believe that she got killed here. And I don't want to even spoil for myself the fact that I am given to understand that she maybe is not so much dead. So I don't know. We'll find out next week.
The Toxic Avenger.
Yeah.
Well, and then he lowers himself. He's gonna, his task is complete as far as he's concerned. He lowers himself into this awesome, crazy bed that he's built, bed/tomb that he's built with a phone, by the way, just in case he wants to take calls in his tomb.
As he embalms himself.
And just in case you didn't know, the vials are labeled embalming fluid. So if you were confused, if he had confused himself, that is actually embalming fluid, or so we're told.
He truly, again, he has Batman's habit of labeling everything. Just he is,
of course.
Dr. Phibes is ISO 9000 compliant. He's ready.
Yeah.
Anyway, he puts himself into this bed with it's got a mirrored ceiling and darkness and
man, he's such a weirdo.
And a really awesome, creepy jazz version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow plays.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
That's absolutely correct. Yes, and what's great is when he lowers himself into that bed with his wife's corpse, and it closes over and it forms the Art Deco tiled floor of his underlayer. And so when the cops come, of course, he's completely disappeared because he's lowered himself into the floor. Brilliant.
And it goes dark where they're at, so the darkness falls after
right.
that.
And that's it. That's the end of the movie. I mean, he's completely flummoxed everybody. The only thing he didn't manage to do was kill Vesalius' son. That was the one thing.
Which was actually part of his thing, because the whole thing was that his wife had a 50-50 chance, and she lost in her surgery. And he's saying, you have a chance. Your son has a chance too, and he might lose. You might lose him, and he might.
You might end up with a face like mine.
Yes. Oh, that mask is something fierce. Like that is awesome.
Yeah.
When he takes off his mask, and the mask they've created for what he actually looks like under his fire mask is just creepy and crazy. Skull, it looks like something like it's like a leather face in its own right. It's wow, that thing is amazing.
What did you think about the fact that the face that he puts on to appear as Vincent Price is in parts? I mean, it's more like an old-fashioned makeup. It involves a couple of latex ears and a foam
nose.
I
think that's part of making it realistic. As realistic as it is as if you were putting on, the way that the Invisible Man has to put on his face, etc.
That's right.
Like that's kind of how it's done if you're pre-reconstructive surgery, for example. It's not just a rubber mask that you put on. It's you want to make it look realistic. You have prosthetics that equate a face.
Yeah, so there are individual parts,
really cool.
which I guess he's blending together. And again, this is pure fantasy, but he's blended it, very well. I mean, because it actually reaches all the way to his eyelids. And,
sure.
Although they do discolor Price's face to give off the impression that it's not a real face.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. That's a good point.
It's very kind of like pallid, as if he can't quite get it super realistic. But I think that's part of what makes it cool and off-putting, There's
an article I read recently. I think it was in Rolling Stone. But it featured this gentleman who was the first face transplant, and he does have a second face that he's put on, but he suffers from all kinds of problems because he has to work really hard to keep it hydrated because it's impossible so far for them to hook it up to sort of rejuvenate itself on a constant basis the way our faces do. So it dries out. He has to maintain it. It's a mask in a sense, that does get blood, but it's not the same as what you and I deal with.
Right.
Yeah,
oh man, I already hear some screenwriter somewhere thinking up ideas for the Dr. Phibes reboot. Thanks, Jason.
Well, it does say in
do
IMDb. No, it does say in IMDb that there's one in development.
That does not surprise. Well, they were talking about doing sequels to this well into the 80s, and it really was only Price's advancing age that stopped.
Well, and do you know who was going to fight with Phibes?
It's Count Yorga. Count Yorga. We almost got a Count Yorga versus Phibes movie. There was going to be a movie called The Bride of Dr. Phibes, where he resurrects his wife, but she's actually more evil than he is. There was going to be a movie called The Invincible Dr. Phibes, where he fights Nazis. I would have paid to see Phibes resurrect this, where Dr. Phibes was going to come back to life in 1981 in New York City. I mean, I would have watched any one of these. Like, the fact that there is not a proper Dr. Phibes trilogy, it kind of breaks my heart.
So once again, Bill Nye could play Dr. Phibes. Go ahead, Tony.
I remember who was attached. It was Tim Burton and Johnny Depp were going to do Dr. Phibes.
No.
Please no.
No.
Please
stop.
Why?
Unless we can somehow get to Johnny Depp from at least 5 years ago.
Do I have to remind you of what we went through with Dark Shadows, Joya?
I
exactly.
am always going to give Johnny Depp a chance at anything, because most of the time he's awesome.
Not after he doesn't know. Not after the Lone Ranger. No.
Might we talk about that and the Mad Hatter and many other? I have a new theory about him, and we don't have to get into it, but I'll have to talk to Jason about it, because I just realized something the other day.
He can be good. He can be good. He can even be a good Dr. Phibes.
No, Tony, you can't say that and then just leave it.
Give us the short version, because I know we're going to run on.
I realized that he, and there's been several articles about his box office bombs lately, and I realized he has become the ambler. That he ambles through many, many movies. He ambles through Tusk. Not all of these movies are bad, but I'm saying since Jack Sparrow ambled his way through a movie and stumbled his way through a movie, he's ambled through many, many movies. And I just realized, that's his new thing, is although he's a good actor, and I like Johnny Depp in many things, his Tonto is not much different than his Jack Sparrow. And there's been several like that, where you're just he's either manic, or he's just hey, I'm kind of this guy who kind of stumbles through things. Ta-da! Give me my paycheck.
Yeah. So you're not going
I think that for the modern actor that would be a good Dr. Phibes that is from the Pirates movies would be Jeffrey Rush.
Jeffrey Rush would be a wonderful Dr. Phibes.
He would be
Jeffrey
great,
Rush.
actually.
What
really
a fantastic idea.
And he's already been a Vincent Price character. He was already in one other Vincent Price remake. So hey, there's Symphonica there.
House on a Hill, right? Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, he would make such a better Dr. Phibes. That would be amazing.
Well,
I hope that it doesn't get remade, I think, but if Hollywood was dead set on it, which they seem to be on these things,
I don't want a remake.
Make him
just another movie with him.
I would like to go to the Wayback Machine and do another one that was of these. I wish they had just made a third Dr. Phibes. In my perfect world, I would love to see Dr. Phibes fight Nazis. I mean, how great would that have been?
Oh man, Dr. Phibes Nazi Revenge.
It would be funny to sort of turn him into a good guy.
Oh man,
recognize, of course, he truly is the bad guy here. There's no reason to think that these doctors had any particular reason, that they did anything bad or wrong.
One of the other ones that they talked about was going to be Dr. Phibes versus the Satanic Cult. I mean, all of these, a lot of them were kind of evil versus evil scenarios.
Dr. Phibes versus Frankenstein would be awesome too.
Well, especially if it was like the Baron Frankenstein from the Hammer movies.
Yes.
But we talked about the badass Count Yorga. I mean, how he was a perfect villain himself, you know. So I think that would be a good match. So is that why in the next Dr. Phibes movie the good guy is Robert Quarry? Is it because of his guy?
Robert Quarry is not the good guy in Dr. Phibes Voices Again, but he is in it. And reportedly... Did that happen because it was gonna be Yorga, but then they decided not to do it? I have no idea, but I do know that him and Robert Quarry, Vincent Price and Robert Quarry did not get along, and that's something we can talk more about next week.
All right, Tony, I like your theory, your two-depth theory, that you either get one or the other, depending on what movie you're in.
The Ambler.
My problem was just that I thought that. Yeah, I probably liked the Dark Shadows movie, by the way, more than anybody else here. But, you know, I just didn't I don't know. It fell flat to me. It felt like a great lost opportunity. You know, I felt like to really be likable, it would have had to have been Tim Burton's Dark Corners, you know, and let's just go ahead and admit this is a Tim Burton riff on Dark Shadows instead of a weird comedy based on Dark Shadows, a show that nobody remembers, you know. That just didn't make any sense. And anyway, I mean, I know that some people remember it. People listening to this show probably remember Dark Shadows quite well. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm one of the fans myself. But I'm like, you know, what was the point in how that was done? All right. We really should get our final thoughts on the Abominable Dr. Phibes. So we can go in the same order that we went in. Tony, Abominable Dr. Phibes, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like this movie, and since it was unavailable these days on Netflix, I actually ended up forking over for the double feature DVD, and I am happy that I have now can watch the spectacle of this movie as much as I want now. So I'm pretty happy about that. I love it. I think he's just such a great supervillain that other supervillains should watch out. And I also would love to, like I said, I would see Dr. Phibes versus Dr. Doom, Dr. Phibes and his secret hangouts with Prince, where Prince gets his ideas of like how to be an eccentric recluse from Dr. Phibes, and have cool women like in his band. I think I think he may have learned some things from Dr. Phibes. I'm not saying that he did, but
actually,
I wouldn't
Prince
be surprised.
Really good Dr. Phibes.
That would be amazing as well. I highly recommend that you also watch this in a double feature with Phantom of the Paradise.
Can you imagine
and your mind
doing
will
all the like the mannerisms, you know, where his mouth is closed, but he's like waving his arms, going, "As you see, I have built this device through which I may speak."
I want that movie too. I have built a really sexy, funky device.
Come out and play
awesome.
the keyboards.
There would be a lot more purple capes in the Prince Dr. Phibes version.
You bet. Yeah. Oh, somebody please draw that. Holy mackerel, that is a great idea. I want to see that.
I know. My Max, who's been on the show, his wife does mashups like Doctor Who burning the TARDIS in paint, like corpse paint, like he's a black metal Doctor Who. She's done a Freddy Krueger Cosby basket case. She's done a lot, and she did one with Prince as well. But I think I need to pitch her a Prince Dr. Phibes so that she can continue with this. Melanie, and hopefully I'll have to post her Prince when she has Prince up, because oh man, that would be amazing. Anyway, yeah, I love this movie, so everyone can see this.
All right, Julia, final thoughts. The Abominable Dr. Phibes.
Oh, I thought it was a lot of fun. Even some of the things that had bugged me, you guys had sort of turned me around on. So I like it even more than I did at the beginning of the of the call.
It does happen.
Yes,
One of us. Yes,
a freak indeed. And it was I just think it's so pretty. I love looking at all the sets and the costumes and all that. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Drew? Final thoughts.
Well, I was recently doing an interview for a punk rock scene about my comic book, and they asked me about modern horror films that came out in the last year that people should check out. And my response to that was, I actually always invite people to go backwards before looking at what's contemporary, because if you're a horror fan, there's always stuff to dig up, and it's almost always better than what is currently out there. Not to say that there aren't good movies made, but this is a prime example. Like, if you have not seen this movie, for all the reasons that we've discussed it and more, this is an outstanding horror film and so unlike anything you've ever seen before.
That's wonderful. I agree with you completely that when you're looking for inspiration, I believe this sincerely. If you're looking for inspiration, avoid anything that's on your shelf right now. Read stuff that's on your shelf right now to learn how good people are getting at their art and to sort of challenge yourself. But I think when you're looking for inspiration, it's better to just skip back and go back and watch some old movies, read some old books, and you'll come across something that you haven't heard of in a while or that nobody's done a riff on in a while. And that's where new cool stuff comes from. So yeah, totally. All right, I would love to do endorsements. So I don't know, are you guys ready to do endorsements? Anybody have anything else they'd love to share? All right then. Tony, do you have anything to share with us this week?
A couple of it. I think I endorsed it before, but if you dig this movie, you should also watch Vincent Price in The Haunted Palace, which is actually has the plot of Lovecraft's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. Really awesome, really great Vincent Price character piece. And I also endorse a movie that may not be for everyone, but it is crazy and just wackadoo that Draft House Films is releasing, called R100, about a man who, his wife's in a coma, he's distraught and messed up and hires a dominatrix service that will basically surprise him. And you hire for a year and you can't cancel the contract, and these women show up and kick or beat or do, just be dominatrix to you. And it gets even crazier than that as it goes along. And by the same guy who directed and wrote Big Man Japan, if you've seen that, Hitoshi Matsumoto, who's also been one of Tim and I's favorite comedians since I saw it, since my friend Hiro gave me tapes of a show called Downtown, which is like a comedy show / precursor to anything. Like, it's cooler than anything Jackass ever did. Like, it's not as maybe gross, but it's kind of more awesome and paved the way for stuff like that. And he's a huge comedian. Think of whatever comedian that everybody knows. I don't know if that would be like Leno or Seinfeld. Something that your mom and your grandmother know. That caliber of comedian. Matsumoto and his crew are those people. And so this movie R100, he directed it, and I think he's got a cameo. Yeah. It's showing at probably the Draft Houses. It'll be on video on demand. Again, it's not for everyone, that's for sure. But I thought it was crazy. Oh, it's crazy enough that one guy said he was at a film festival, one of the programmers for Fantastic Fest. He's like, well, if anything's crazier than this other movie, I'll eat my shirt. And he got to one point and then texted Tim and was like, well, looks like I'll have to eat my shirt. And which they actually cooked a shirt at Fantastic Fest. And he ate basically shirt ramen, kind of. Yeah. So this movie, R100, caused the person, it's so crazy, caused the person to have to eat a shirt. So there you go.
Funny. Hilarious.
Beautiful. All right. Well, and that was the first one. Julia, did you have any endorsements for us?
Well, I already did my endorsement, which is Downton Abbey. I mean, it's just so great. I love the costumes.
And also
I love
your
the
new
crazy.
Downton Abbey Dr. Phibes fanfic.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Please
send that. If anybody makes that, please send it.
I love the idea. I would like to see the Dowager Countess meet Dr. Phibes. I think that'd be really interesting.
And they team up and wreak havoc.
Yes.
Here comes the new Volnavia.
Ooh. There's got to be somebody younger, but them as super villains would be awesome.
Lady Mary.
True. Endorsements for us this week?
Well, there was a lot of stuff I dug into during the break, but I got, for Christmas, several years ago I read Anno Dracula, and I became kind of a Kim Newman fan from that. But over the break, I was given both the Bloody Red Baron, which I enjoyed, but I was also given the third book in the Anno Dracula series, which is Dracula Cha Cha Cha, and it takes place in 1959 in Rome. And it kicked off this very kind of interchanged sequence of events, because a lot of that book references La Dolce Vita, and then with the recent passing of Anita Ekberg, it really just kind of all clicks together. So I've been still thinking a lot about that book, and aside from the obvious connections to that, like if you're a James Bond fan, there's actually a character in the book that's a vampire version of James Bond. There's references to the Mother of Tears trilogy. It's just so much if you're like a pop culture, like the Addams Family show up at one point. Like there's so much if you're like a pop culture nut to really dig into this. And I honestly, like if you like mashup fiction, like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or anything like this, I honestly think in some respects, and this may be heresy to say, Kim Newman has done this better than Alan Moore may have. When at least when getting into the 20th century aspects of it, like the Victorian stuff, Moore may still have him beat, but like this pitch perfect version of like 1959 Rome, but populated with various monsters and vampires, is just fascinating to me.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I have Dracula Cha Cha Cha. I just haven't read it yet, and I'm just so intrigued by the time period in there.
You'll really like. There's a novella in the back of it called Age of Aquarius, and it's definitely groovy horror. I think you would really get more out of that.
That's really good. That's awesome.
Now I'm going to be stuck on that song for the rest of the night.
The Age of Aquarius?
This is the dawning of the age.
Sweet. That's a wonderful endorsement, too. Okay.
No, how has that song never ended up in a vampire movie? With the Let the Sunshine In thing, you think, that'd be a great
yeah, you're right. That would go well.
Exterminate some vampires to that.
The answer is that people are uncomfortable with irony. This is the truth. I really believe this. In other words, we've all said occasionally that sometimes it can be fun to have something that's ironic and clever, but it also has a tendency to turn people off, because they're like, oh, well, now I'm uncomfortable because clearly this is intended to kind of also make me smile, and that's different from the mood that we've been doing. And that's sort of, that I think is a sophisticated choice, but it also makes people a little uncomfortable. And so, it very seldom does irony work. So then
I'm saving it for when they make the Halloween Man movie. Nobody can take that idea, copywriting it right now. Or you can't copyright an idea, but I'm calling that.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I mean, Terminator 2 used Bad to the Bone. And that, Cameron said, I was uncomfortable with this because it's a joke, It's used, it's kind of silly to suddenly have Bad to the Bone playing.
Which ushered in every movie ever with a leather jacket zipping up.
Oh, yeah.
To have to play Bad to the freaking bone.
But it does work in Terminator 2.
It does work, and the audiences really liked it. And he was like, turns out I was wrong. People really dug this. But you're right, Tony. I would I would caution anybody to never, ever, ever use Bad to the Bone again.
Or School's Out for Summer.
Because, I agree. Although when you think about it, these things have probably been really, really good to George Thorogood and Alice Cooper. So, that was Alice Cooper, right? Wasn't it School's Out?
That's Alice Cooper.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, those, hey, so good for Alice and George. All right. My endorsement actually is a tool this time around. So I've been doing some work on screenwriting. I was telling somebody else about this today, and this is something to share with the audience. So if you write screenplays or comic book scripts, which are often in screenplay format, and you use Final Draft, there's a free Google app, Chrome app, called Raw Story, RAWSDORY. It is free, and you can ingest Final Draft scripts into it and work with them out of Chrome, or you can just do scripts from scratch, and it uses all the Final Draft forms. You can right-click to change something from dialogue to a parenthetical to a character name and whatever. It's very, very easy, and it stores everything on the cloud, and then you can export out to a text file, which easily imports back into Final Draft, and so forth. And I've been using it for the last week. I'm so happy with it, and it's free. So Raw Story is just a fantastic writing tool that I've been enjoying very much over the last week. I should also mention that we made a while back when we did Audrey Rose as a bonus episode in the Exorcist series. We said, hey, there's a sequel to Audrey Rose called For the Love of Audrey Rose. One of us should read that and let us know if it's any good. I did read The Love of Audrey Rose. It's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible book. It was slow and dull and amazing. It was amazing to me that it was an entire novel. It was amazing to me that it got published. I was astonished. So, and I'm only willing to say all this because it came out 40 years ago. So probably nobody is alive to be insulted. But yes. So my anti-endorsement, do not read For the Love of Audrey Rose.
Anti-endorsement, we can do that?
Yes, we can.
That's awesome.
It's new.
My whole world has just blown anew in 2015. All the negativity I can now bring to the podcast airwaves.
Yes.
I think the trick will be that you have to choose one or the other. I think you have to choose either an anti-endorsement or an endorsement.
But I did both. I did.
Yeah, but I think that we need to not have both.
Okay. All right.
This is fine music with the introduction.
So torn.
This is like the spin-off, It's like you're allowed to have the crossover for because you're starting this new thing, but after this.
But can I choose the light or the dark side?
Yes.
Listen, Frank DeFilida, who was the writer of Audrey Rose, he's I have no idea if he's still alive, but he did great work, and he had some hit books. I mean, The Entity was a big super hit, so he has nothing to fear from me. But For the Love of Audrey Rose, I really got the impression he was just I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with this. So there we go. Yes. Thank you, everybody, and it's so great to be back. If you are listening, and if it's your first time listening, welcome. Come to our Facebook page. Leave comments for us. If you are returning, same thing. Leave comments. Tell your friends. Leave a review on iTunes if you haven't. It helps people find the show. We are dying to talk to you and to find more listeners and to keep growing. We're so excited to be back, and it's going to be a fantastic year. I have no doubt about it. So thanks, everybody, for being back. Welcome to 2015. Bye.
Bye.
Night.
Night.